Hi everyone, this collaborate is about Assessment 2. Assessment 2 is quite a different assessment to one that you would have done before. I think it's going to be fun and interesting. We will go through each slide first, and then after each slide we'll have a question time. So feel free to put up your hand and join in, or type in the text box. Both Rach and I will be there to answer your questions. Assessment 2 in a nutshell. This task requires you as a group to run a weekly discussion on the discussion board. Each group will be allocated a week, and during this week each group member will be allocated a different task. If you're not in the group that is running the week, it's still important to participate, as you will also be marked on participation and how well you participate. We'll go into this in more detail in the coming slides. Throughout Module 2 of this unit, we explore a range of issues and practices in the teaching and assessment of English. And in English and other subjects, depending on the context and depending on our students, our experiences will differ greatly. In fact, I find from year to year my experience differs greatly. From school to school, it will differ. This is a great environment for us to discuss our experiences, debate our findings in our readings, and it is a really good way to learn through other people's experience. And that is why this assessment will be valuable to you. Assessment overview. It's important, as I said earlier, that we learn from each other and each other's experiences. And a lot of space in Module 2 is devoted to group discussion. And the discussion forms the basis of Assessment 2. There are two components to this assessment task. The first one, which will be half of the mark, and it's a team mark, will be working in a team to facilitate a discussion. We'll go into that a little bit later. And the second half is an individual mark, and it will be your ongoing participation and contribution to the discussions facilitated by others. It will be important that your contributions enhance the discussion and relate to the reading material that week. Assessment criterion. 1. Understanding of the issues and practices related to English teaching in the primary classroom. Relate your discussion to real-life experiences. What have you seen working in the classroom? What have you seen that doesn't work so well? In what situations have you seen things working really well, and maybe in a different situation it wouldn't work well? Number 2. Application of logical, creative and/or critical thinking in the communication of ideas, and in understanding the topics of discussion. You need to show that you understand the week's topic and the reading material. Have a big think about how you will communicate your ideas. Be creative. Use pictures and other ways of communication. Number 3. Effectiveness of contributions in extending own and others' thinking, and in terms of thoroughness, clarity, and depth of responses. Respond in a way that encourages further thinking. Use questions to promote discussion. 4. Professional language and literacy skills. Keep your language professional, and at this stage of your studies you should be able to demonstrate good literacy skills. Part 1. Teamwork. This is a team assessment, and as such your entire team will be assessed on the process and outcomes of your discussion. You need to work as a team. You need to help each other, and you all need to do your part. You will all receive the same mark for this part of the assessment, so it will pay to help each other out. Rach and I will be on the sidelines of the discussion board during this process, and this is worth 50% of the assessment weighting. Step 1. Form discussion teams. So we need to form teams of 5 or 6. And in my group there is a wiki, and most people have allocated themselves a group. Well done, guys. If you haven't, you need to go and do that. Rachel's groups, Rach can talk about that in a minute. At the end of week 4, if you have not signed into a group, we will put you into a group. You need to discuss with your group your deadlines. How are you going to communicate? I've known in the last teaching practice, some people communicated via Facebook. Some people communicated via email. Google Docs is another way to communicate. You need to find the best way that suits your whole team to communicate. You will work out your roles this week. So you will need to decide who does what, and we'll talk about the roles in a minute. Step 2, choose a week. This was part of choosing a group. In my groups, we've all put ourselves into the week and the group at the same time. Each week has a different topic. Week 6, your topic will be Defining Balance, a contemporary English program. Week 7, Beyond Phonics, the teaching of reading. Week 8, More Than Sounds, the teaching of spelling. Week 9, Classic and Contemporary, identifying and working with literary texts. And week 10, Teacher as Researcher Monitor, assessing, reading and writing. Now I find all of those topics really interesting, and I'm really looking forward to hearing where the discussion goes. Step 3. Adopt a role. Each person in the group needs to adopt a role. These roles are adapted from literature circles. Each person in the team will be performing a different function. So your discussion will be provided with momentum, structure and diversity. For information on setting up teams, under the Assessment 2 Group Discussions Contributions, have a read about setting up your teams. If you go to week 5, have a read through. I would advise going early to week 5, checking it out, watching the podcast, and reading about working as a team and setting up your team. I think week 5 will be an important week to read, and I think it would be a good idea to read it early. Okay, now we get to the exciting part, the roles. The first role is that of director, and the director's job is to introduce a discussion, lead the conversation and keep the discussions going. So you will need to come up with a way that is going to encourage group discussion on the topic. You need to thoroughly explain what the discussion is about. You will start the discussion off, and you will be the person who comes back and links topics together, keeps the discussion going. So basically, you're the director of this discussion. The connector is the second role. The connector's role is to link the discussion to readings, texts that we've read or you've seen, or maybe a web page, other experiences, maybe in a classroom that you've been in on prac. You might have seen stories in the media, contemporary stories about literacy. So you need to connect to all of those things. So that is the connector's role. The questioner. The role of the questioner is quite important. It will help to keep your discussion going. The questioner will need to ask at least 3 questions. The questions need to be relevant to the topic and the learning materials. The questioner will make the discussion continue and lengthen it and extend the discussion. So the questioner has quite an important role. The resourcer. The resourcer has another important role. The resourcer is required to find links, existing resources that relate to the topic in a professional context. They may be resources that you have used in the past. They might be resources that you have found on the internet or have seen working in a classroom. The illustrator. The illustrator's role is to provide at least 3 visual representations of ideas that are related to the discussion. And it's important that they are relevant and then they add to the discussion. The summarizer. The summarizer's role is to give a summary of what has occurred in the discussion and to highlight the key points of learning that have occurred in the discussion. Now, the summarizer may not just do them at the end. The summarizer can do little summaries throughout the whole discussion. So once it comes around to your week to facilitate the discussion, you'll be responsible for the discussion that week. Your team will draw on a wide range of resources. For example, the Australian curriculum. And you will demonstrate that you understand the issues and practices related to teaching in the primary classroom. Your discussions through your team roles will extend and connect and challenge discussions and participants. Your discussions will have a sense of debate through the discussion and the resources used. You need to be creative and critical in your thinking and communication of the ideas. One thing I would like to say is that some teams may not have 6 people to complete all the roles. So there may be a bit of doubling up. So you need to also decide who will have 2 roles. Again, we'll be using a holistic rubric. To gain a pass in the team section, we'll be having a team page part of the rubric and an individual part of the rubric. So to gain a pass in the team section, you need to cover all of the areas in the pass section. For instance, you need to have all the team roles complete. Okay, so we need the director to complete the initial posting, the resourcer to complete the resources, the questioner to make sure that the questioner puts in 3 questions, the illustrator to put in representations of ideas with illustrations, the summarizer to perform their role. So each person has to perform their role to gain a pass. As well as each person performing their role, each team needs to demonstrate an understanding of the Australian curriculum in English and the other learning materials. And this needs to be evident across all roles. So each team member needs to show this. You need to demonstrate proficient literacy skills. Make sure that you proofread every discussion before you post it. Make sure that you provide evidence and reference using APA style anything that you have used that is written by anyone else. To gain a credit, you need to fulfill all the requirements of the pass level, but this is to be done with more sophistication. For instance, if you're a questioner or a connector, you need to be critical, where we look at the more creative side of the illustrator role. You need to extend, connect and challenge the people who are participating in the discussion. You need to make sure that you use references, including the Australian curriculum. In addition to using your proficient literacy skills, you will also demonstrate that using your word choices and the way you are writing to communicate, to get your idea across. So you need to communicate effectively and efficiently. You need to use APA referencing conventions, and you need to provide evidence and links to a range of sources. To gain a distinction, you need to meet all the requirements of the credit, but with a higher degree of competence in communication. So you need to draw on evidence from a wide range of professional and academic sources. You need to support each post with evidence. Make sure your language and your spelling, punctuation, grammar is addressed through careful proofreading. Make sure you proofread your work before posting. Okay, the tone of the language you use. Think about how you're going to write things. Consider the impact that your writing will make. Alright, to be awarded a high distinction for the teamwork, you must meet all the requirements of the distinction and show higher levels of insight. You need to go beyond acknowledging the viewpoint being expressed and challenge and extend viewpoints. You need to point out inconsistencies in arguments, question people, point out similarities and differences in perspectives, suggest additional readings and points of view, present reflective questions that will extend and conclude the conversation. There will be very few to no referencing spelling, grammar or punctuation errors. Your communication is purposeful and deliberate. You've used evidence to demonstrate that you've researched and you have a high quality professional resources and statements, and you have supported these with relevant and recent references. Now we come to the individual contribution part of the assessment. So in addition to your teamwork and presenting your week's discussion, you will be assessed on your individual contribution to each week's discussion. There's no minimum or maximum word count for your individual contribution. We are looking for quality of discussion rather than quantity. Okay, so just don't write for the sake of writing. Make sure that you present quality. Meaningful discussion that relates to the topic and the reading materials. This part of the assessment is worth 50%. It is best not to leave your part of the discussion until the end of the week. Get in early so that others can respond to your posts. Part 2 of your individual posts. You need to demonstrate a high understanding of the Australian curriculum. Weave existing points from other posts. So comment on other people's points and weave them into your discussion. Have critical and creative thoughts. Challenge other people. If you don't agree with what they say, challenge them. Come up with other ideas to challenge them. Demonstrate your familiarity with the current research on the topic. Demonstrate your familiarity with the contemporary English teaching practice. So show us how much you understand by responding to the posts. Make sure that you link your posts to relevant and recent references. Go beyond the reading materials. Find more to add to the discussion. Again, we'll be using a holistic rubric. You need to make sure you have completed all aspects of the task and met all of the criteria at a satisfactory level. Don't just give one-word responses. Engage with the group in the discussion. Answer the questions posed by the team of the week. Make sure that you are representing your own contributions, not just others' thinking. Okay, so you need to put in your own ideas about the topics. That you demonstrate your knowledge of the Australian curriculum. That you have understood the topics across the weeks. Again, adhere to the conventions of English. Show that you have proficient English skills. Make sure you proofread your work for spelling errors. Use a range of resources. To be awarded a credit, you must fulfill all of the requirements of the pass, but with more sophistication. So, going beyond single posts and responding to multiple members of the discussion team, not just one post. Show evidence of critical and creative thinking in your responses. Extend and challenge yourself and reinforce the points made by others. Make sure you use your own perspective and support it by relevant literature. Make sure the language and the word choices you make add to the discussion. Make deliberate word choices. And you need to adhere to APA referencing for a range of resources. To be awarded a distinction, you must meet all the requirements of the credit level, with a higher degree of competence in written communication. You need to draw on a wider range of sources, so more than just the learning materials. You have supported your statements with appropriate evidence. Make sure that the language, the spelling, the punctuation and the grammar has been addressed with thorough proofreading. Demonstrate sensitivity to your audience. Think about the way you write things and the language and the tone of your writing. To be awarded a high distinction, your contributions must meet all requirements of the distinction standard and show higher levels of sophistication and insight. You need to make meaningful contributions to the discussion each week. You need to effectively weave existing posts, use other people's ideas and extend them, discuss them critically and creatively. Show that you have familiarity with the current field of research. Use effective language conventions. Use your wording carefully. Across all weeks, not just 1 or 2 weeks, across all weeks, your writing needs to be logical, concise, and integrate ideas that convey meaning and purpose and sensitivity to the contributions of others. You need to support your ideas with relevant and recent references. And you need to make sure that you use APA referencing. There should be no errors in referencing, spelling, grammar, punctuation in your posts. In both sections of this assessment, you need to make sure you maintain appropriate standards of academic writing and use a professional tone. You need to use full sentences, correct spelling and grammar, no abbreviations. We're not writing texts. Make sure that you reference your literature. Look beyond the internet. Sensitivity to audience. Concise and logical writing. I want to go back to sensitivity to audience. Sometimes when you write things online, it comes out a bit harshly. So you need to have a think, have a read of what you've written, and make sure that it sounds okay. Read it back to yourself before posting. Okay, here we've got some websites that will help you to research what makes a good online discussion. So go on there and have a look at those links. You'll find this PowerPoint in the assessment section of on Blackboard in our discussion board. I know it's early. We haven't even put in assessment 1 yet. And we're talking about assessment 2. But while we're completing assessment 2, keep assessment 3 in mind. Because assessment 3 requires you to analyse your group discussions and reflect on your own role during the discussion. And you will need to draw examples from the discussion board posts. You also need to have a collation of resources related to the topic your team discussed. And one of these resources may have been shared during your group discussions. So it's a good idea to keep a journal and collect extra resources during assessment 2. And this is going to help you with assessment 3. Here we have 5 essential documents to read in preparation for assessment 2. Obviously you need to read the assignment PDF. And you should have all downloaded that. It's in the assessments page on Blackboard. On my discussion board, it's in the assessments section. I'm sure Rach has it there too. The marking. ELAs must mark off the rubric, so you need to make sure you know what is on the rubric. Read through it. Read through it when you're doing your task. Make sure you know what is expected. Make sure you read concepts and readings for weeks 6 to 10. Also add your own research. And, of course, the Australian curriculum in English.